Yo, what's happening? This is your boy Derek Minor, and you're listening to the Overflow Beyond the Music podcast.
Yeah, I know a couple dealers and a couple gang bangers. Try to run off with their money, guaranteed they'll steal you with the stainers. Master used to call us monkeys till we started clipping with bananas. Throwing seeds at your head. Now your melon fruit salad. Whole body full of rage. Whole soul full of pain. When hurt people, you gon' hear that shit from the gauge. Yeah, I'm talking about race and any topic I can think.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Overflow Beyond the Music podcast. I am your host, Josh McCabe. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. I am super pumped about this episode today. Super pumped about the guests that we have on. I know you're going to love this interview with my buddy Derek Minor. He brought the heat today. So today, you may be listening maybe the evening right now, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and that is the beauty of the podcast. You can listen whenever you want. It can be on your commute to work. It can be while you're at the gym. It can be while you're doing stuff around the house, whenever that might be. If you're like me, I typically am a podcast listener. Well, definitely not a podcast listener at the gym, because the gym and me do not currently coexist. But when I'm making dinner around the house or just doing stuff around the house, I love to throw on a podcast, and I love to just journey into the story of the podcast, whatever it might be about. And really our heart of this is that you would be able to dig deeper with some of your favorite artists, and even some artists that you've never heard of before. The whole point is that you would get to know their journey. You get to know where they came from, where they're going, and some of the things in their life that have really shaped who they've become as an artist and as a believer. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's why we call it Beyond the Music, because we're going beyond the music. And before we get to our next guest on this podcast, I got to tell you, I've been trying to schedule this man for a little bit, and when I started this podcast, I immediately thought, who are some people that I currently know and have a bit of a relationship with that I know have something to say? And I'm telling you, Derek Minor has something to say, and he is not shy about saying exactly what he feels like needs to be said. And I have so much respect for him, not only as an artist, but as a man who's just standing up for what he believes in, speaking it out, and trying to challenge both people within the church and outside of the church with his message. And you're going to love the conversation that we have today. The gentleman that I'm going to be interviewing here, I got to know him a few years ago, and we've kept in touch ever since, and he is as real as they come. He is not only talented, he's a multi-award winning artist and nominee. He's even got a Grammy to his name. But that's enough of me talking about this guy. Let's head on into my conversation with Derek Minor on the Overflow Beyond the Music podcast.
Who you know, shining in these streets like a light, man. Who you know, stay the same, sun, stay the Sunday. Who you know, taking home on tracks like a...
All right, so here I am, and I got my boy Derek Minor on the line, and maybe it's too early in our friendship to call you my boy, but dude, you when I met you a few years ago, you made me feel like I'd known you for about 10 years. So how you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. Nah, we homies, man. That's what it is. It's love.
Yeah, man. Well, I was on Winter Jam with you. I was working for a sponsor at the time. I think it was like back in, I don't know, maybe 2014.
Yeah.
And man, I was just sitting in catering, and we just got talking, and you gave me a little quick schooling on hip hop and rap and the culture, the different kinds that come out of the different regions. And we'll get into that in a bit, because man, you're a wealth of knowledge in that. But you're coming to me right now from Nashville, Tennessee. Is that right?
Yeah,
And you live a little bit outside the city. You got a home studio there, which you're recording. We moved our time around today because you've got some kids in school that you need to get off to school. So
yeah,
tell me about your kids. Tell me about your family.
Man, so I'm married, one woman. You know what I mean? I'm not a polygamist.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Thanks for the clarification.
I got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, 2 boys. Nolan and Zane. Nolan's the oldest, and they're amazing, man. I find myself just enjoying my time with them more than I do anything else, man. So it's been cool. Like, so they've been off for a month. but they're tired of each other right now, so they were fighting all day yesterday. So they're like, man, let's get back to school, Dad. You know it's crazy when your oldest is like, Dad, I can't wait to go back to school. You like, all right.
Oh man. You know, it's like once the kids get in school, it's like my wife and I, when when both our kids finally were in school, we just kind of looked at each other one day. It's like, do you want to go for lunch or something? Like, what do we do now?
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels, man. It's like, hold up, what's going on here?
Totally. You start having afternoon dates instead of evening dates because babysitting gets expensive.
Yeah, it's wild, man. So, yeah, man, I'm just loving life, man, and just loving everything, man. Like, it's been a blessing. I have no complaints. Life is great.
Well, you're in the studio right now working on some stuff, and I feel like you're probably one of the hardest working guys in the industry because every time we connect or whatever, you always got new stuff to show me. And so what are you working on right now?
Man, so right now I'm chilling. I just released the third project out of my Up and Away series. It was called The Trap. So I finished. It's a 4-part series for those that don't know. First one was called Your Soul Must Fly. The second one called High Above, and the last one called The Trap. So in the final fourth piece will be called By Any Means. So if you put it together, it says your soul must fly high above the trap by any means. So I finished that, and man, we're working on the rollout, getting that done. And right now I'm just creating, keeping my tools sharp, and producing for other people right now. So it's cool though. It's a good pace for me right now.
Well, I mean, I loved the concept of your soul must fly high above the trap by any means. And because when the first one came out, I saw the cover and I was a little bit confused. I was trying to figure out what this whole thing was all about. And now that I see it in its later stages, you now realize that this is kind of a piece of a puzzle that's being put together. So tell me how that all goes together.
Well, it was crazy. I was in a hotel room after a show and kind of thinking about what the next phases were going to be, and I came up with that line, your soul must fly high above the trap by any means. It just kind of kept harassing me, so I woke up and I just started jotting down notes. So from that, I saw it as a big puzzle piece, and I had to think, man, who could do the artwork justice? So my man Don Clark from Invisible Creature, me and him are buddies. I think he did my best album cover I've ever had off of my album Minorville. And I was like, he's the only person I could think who could finish this off in a way. So I sent it to him, and man, he literally did the cover, the concept for it in like a couple hours. And I was like, wow, that's it. So we just started putting meat on the bones and all that stuff, and fast forward, and now everything looks great.
Oh man, it's clever. I love it. And we'll get into the songs on those projects in a minute, because there is a lot of content and a lot of talking points that we can go to on that. But this podcast has always been the heart of it has really been like, man, we can talk about your new single, we can talk about your new tours, we can talk about all that stuff, and we will talk about that because that stuff's good stuff. But I'd rather know more about who Derek Minor is, and obviously life growing up is a huge factor in who we become as men or women and adults and parents. And so tell me about growing up.
Yeah, so that's cool. I'm originally from Pontiac, Michigan, which they call Little Detroit. So it's right outside of Detroit, suburb of Detroit, but it's not suburban at all. It was kind of crazy. So that's where I'm from, but I was raised in a small town called Columbia, Tennessee. So that's in the country. So I had this weird upbringing where I spent my summers with my dad in the city, and then I spent, the rest of my time with my mom in the country. So I kind of had this constant culture shock where it's you're in the middle of the woods and there's rebel flags and all this crazy stuff, and then you go to the city and it's like it's suburban, everything you think quote unquote suburban. So my mom raised me, she was a single mom for the most part. I had a stepfather, but he has some addiction issues, and my dad has some addiction issues. So we kind of dealt with that. So it that's why you hear a lot of that in my music about drugs and different things like that, because that's what I saw growing up, and that's what I wrestled with. So I kind of write from my heart and what I've seen. And that's why you hear the things, my commentary on race, those come from real places. It's not me reading a book and rapping about what I've read. It's what I've actually experienced as a person. And for me, the books brought clarity to my feelings a lot of times, as opposed to me reading a book and saying, oh, guys, this is happening. Let me begin to try to sound smart. No, this is the clarity that I got. So for me, that's kind of my upbringing. It was all over the place, I guess. It's between growing up in black church and living in the middle of the woods, and then living in the city and drugs and all that's different stuff. It was crazy, but man, God used it to mold me to the person I am today, which is beautiful. So it wasn't all. I don't want them to feel doom and gloom, because man, I love growing up, man. Man, my mom did a great job. My dad and my stepdad were great people. And what I've realized in my latter years is that everyone has their issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Some are different than others, but most of those issues manifest from pain. And and we all find different ways to cope with it. So some of us find productive ways. Like some of us may not be drug addicts, but some of us may be workaholics, and that's how we manifest our pain. And others are drug addicts, others addicted to whatever. We all have our issues and things. So that's what I've learned in my latter age.
Well, you mentioned stepdad and your dad. When did your parents split? Or were they together? Or,
yeah, no, they never were. Yeah, so my mom and dad, they never were married. So, and she moved me to Tennessee when I was 6 or 7. So it was kind of one of those things where, it's my dad. I didn't really know much about marriage, and then my mom, she married my stepdad when I was like 10 or 11. Right. So they stayed together up until he passed away. So yeah.
And tell me about, like, I don't ask this question lightly, but tell me about growing up as a kid with people in your life who are addicts and struggling and battling those demons.
It was hard. In that sense, I guess in one sense, it's like when I would be around my dad or stepdad when they weren't on drugs, they were amazing. Like, my stepdad was hilarious, yo. Like, he would make fun of people. It'd be so funny. Like, he was one of those guys that, man, like, he was like 6'4". He used to play football for UT, and he was just an athlete in every sense of the word, just like a jock. So everything was funny, everything was cool. But then, he'd be gone for like a week or so at a time on like binges, drug binges. And then from that, what would happen is he'd come home, and then because his conscience was eating at him because he felt bad, he didn't really have anyone to show him about forgiveness, or how to forgive himself. Not only just us forgiving him, but how to forgive yourself. So then from that, I think he'd go through like slight depressions, or he would be off-putting in a sense, like he'd get angry with me. I think sometimes he would take out some of his frustration on me at times, but it was frustration he had with himself. So and that's why I learned all this in my 30s. When you're just 15, you're like, dang, why is dude tripping? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then he becomes the bad guy. But then as you get older, and then you have your own struggles, then you realize, oh, I see what this is. What this is that he didn't have someone to teach him how to forgive himself. And me being a Christian and believer in Christ, like, that's the main thing that you hear him preach about or teach about in the Gospels is forgiveness, whether it's forgiveness with Yah, the Father, or whether it's forgiveness with one another. It says all the commandments are on two things: love God with all your heart and love your brother as yourself. So and from that, when you see that, then that's how you learn to forgive yourself. You know what I mean? That's how you learn that, you know, if God is forgiving me, then why can't I forgive myself? So from that, as I learned that, I'm like, man, it's almost like sometimes I wish I could go back in those times and be more gracious and loving to him, and I wish I could show him how to forgive himself, you know?
And man, that's something that like I've seen in so many years as being a pastor, and even in my own journey, that like the enemy's his only tool is lies. And if he can lie to you and make you feel like your thing is bigger than what Christ did on the cross, then he keeps you in this holding pattern, you know, like, and where essentially you keep repeating the same mistakes. And
absolutely.
Man, so many stories come out though of guys who've grown up in situations like that, and the cycle perpetuates in their life moving forward. So how did you, Derek, break the cycle for you and for your family moving forward?
I didn't. It was Christ.
Amen to that, man.
Quite honest, I wish I could duplicate, or I could package that up and give it to everyone, but there's no 10 steps I could give you, or one step, man. It's even a process now for me. You know, with my family, you know, it's like the more I study, the more I learn about Yah, the more I learn about Yeshua, Jesus, like the more I learn about him, the more I want to model that. And then the more I've learned, not just, you know, different rules and regulations and things of that nature, but the more I actually learn how much he actually loves me, how much he actually cares for me, how much I'm actually valued, then from that, my confidence begins to grow in the sense that I could just live a life that's free. And that's why, you know, the Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. So, you know, I've been chasing liberty. I've been chasing freedom. I've been removing things in my life that make me less free. And that's kind of, if there was any step, I would say for anyone out there that's like, man, I want to forgive. You know, I think, you know, I had a friend tell me this. I was struggling with this specific sin, and this thing that just, I couldn't get over it. And he said, man, the problem is you're obsessed with trying to fix yourself. He said, you need to be obsessed with Jesus. And as you become more obsessed with him, you'll begin to process, and things will become easier for that. So that really kind of stuck with me early on in my faith. And now as I'm more mature, I'm realizing what he meant. It's man, you know, I don't read the Bible out of some sort of obligation, because, you know, Paul says in Galatians that anything that's not done of faith is sin. So it's like, if I don't have this desire, this burning desire to read or pray, like if I'm just doing it out of obligation and to make myself look better, then it becomes the thing that becomes good, could even become bad for you. So for me, I'm like reading the Bible because I'm like, man, I need to learn and grow, and because I want more freedom, I want more liberty. And man, the more I pray, the more I read, the more that's what it's been for me, you know. Yeah,
man, and like I was challenged in this the other day, and primarily from my wife, who you know, thank God for godly women in our lives, you know, that you know, give us a slap around when we're being, you know, moody or grumpy, but also when we're not pursuing God. And I was frustrated about a bunch of stuff, and I was just telling her how that I felt like all these people had let me down, and then, you know, I started treating her like she had let me down, and she hadn't at all. And she just looks at me and goes, "When was the last time you were in the Word?"
Hey,
and I'm like, man, like, she goes, "You're frustrated because you are looking to everybody else to fill this gap in your life that only Jesus is meant to sit in." Let me ask you this: when you're in that place and you're going, man, I need to be filled. I need to go to God. I need to go to spend some time with Jesus. How does that look for you specifically?
Constant prayer. I try to remind myself that I don't have the ability in and of myself to give myself just peace. Because think about that. People that are tormented and frustrated, like, if they could give themselves peace, they would. No one would live in torment and frustration. You know what I mean?
Right.
But for some of that, for us, is realizing what is the object of our torment and frustration and letting it go.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So, and the thing is, if you want to hold on to that, like, God's not going to snatch it from you. But there's been times I prayed, I was like, God, snatch this from me. You know what I mean? And I think as we do that, like, he hears our prayers and walks us along with that. But for me, a lot of that was unforgiveness. So same deal kind of with what you said. There's people that's wronged us. And if you live long enough, you're going to get wronged by people.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's just what it is. But, you know, when you look in the scriptures, it talks about that, talks about many of you have been turned over to the tormentors because of your unforgiveness. And I know in myself, I had unforgiveness with my pops, unforgiveness with people that done me wrong in business, unforgiveness with people that done me wrong at churches. Like, if you just live long enough, you're going to be frustrated with somebody. And I had to remind myself, or I needed, you know, God to remind me that, man, look, let that stuff go. Pray for. That's why the Lord tells us to pray for our enemies, not necessarily just out of some obligation, but because your enemies are hurting. And they're hurting you out of their hurt. They're hurting you out of their pain. Like, they're your enemy because they don't even realize how to forgive themselves. They're enemies. They're enemies of themselves. They're getting in their own way. So, for me, in that sense, I had to let go of unforgiveness. And I got to a place where I was like, look, I'm not holding nothing against anyone because that stuff is toxic. And trying to live in that space where I'm aware of where my frustrations come from and what's putting this separation between me and God, you know. So if it's unforgiveness or if it's whatever, gluttony, whatever it is, man, you know, in the Old Testament, it talks about if you follow the Lord's commandments, you'll be blessed. So it's like, for me, I'm trying to live in that space, you know, where I'm blessed by constantly just doing what he asked me to do and living a life that's honorable to him.
Well, man, I feel like there needs to be a Derek Minor book about about spiritual living, man, because I feel like you are speaking to so many people and just the way you live and the way you carry yourself, and man, it's not just your music that's influential, but just you as a person, and when you speak, people listen, and man, I admire that about you. But I want to talk about your music for a second, because obviously your relationship with Christ is a huge influence in your music. But what other things have influenced you musically, not just lyrically, but even stylistically?
Man, I love dope music, man. So obviously hip hop. I'm a huge fan of everyone, and for me, even, you know, a lot of times, especially guys that have been doing it for a while, the new artists that come out, they're like, oh, they're not doing this. And I love I'm literally a fan of music right now. I listen to the new stuff. I listen to the old stuff. So that's kind of, for me, as far as hip hop, that's my basis is, you know, if we're talking stylistically, I just listen to everything. And if there's artists I like, you know, I ask myself, why do I like this artist? And then from that, I begin to study and add pieces to my craft that person is doing correctly. And then also, I have a pretty diverse palette, so I'm a huge jazz fan. I love symphonies.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you, what is something that you have listened to in the last week that you think might shock people, that they'd be like, that I did not picture that.
I listened to the soundtrack of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Ennio.
Wow.
Yeah, so, you know, like, one of my favorite joints is I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's this one called The Ecstasy of Gold. So if you go back to Jay-Z's album, he sampled it. It was a long time ago, but Ecstasy of Gold is like, it's one of the most beautiful compositions I've ever heard. If you get a chance to listen to it. But it's another record called Donald Byrd and the Voices, and a specific song is called Cristo Redentor, I think is how you pronounce it, or The Black Disciple. But pretty much what it is jazz music, but he took a gospel choir and mixed that in, and he did it in the 70s, I believe. It was in the 70s. But yeah, man, that's kind of that's what I'm on, man.
Well, man, whatever you got to do to stay inspired and keep it fresh, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell me sort of about, like, how would you describe, how would Derek Minor describe Derek Minor's music?
How would I describe it? I would describe it as diverse. I would describe it as from the heart, and I would describe it as polished. That'd probably be the three descriptors I would use. I love, like, if you listen to every album, no album sounds the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't like. I get bored when people ask me to keep doing the same thing over and over again. So I just do what I like at the moment. So yeah, man, that's how I would say. Yeah.
You kind of reference it a little bit in the name of the record, The Trap, but describe some of those influences, because you're talking to a guy here who appreciates and loves hip-hop and appreciates and loves your music and will listen to it, but may not know the history of the sounds and what exactly, how to describe what I'm listening to. So help me understand some of those stylistic things around hip-hop music. Give me the quick hip-hop history lesson right now here on the podcast.
Yeah, so if you were to listen to the trap, first off, trap music originated in Atlanta.
Okay.
If you listen to all the way back to from Goody Mob to Outkast, they were talking about the trap. But what really popularized it was T.I. and Gucci Mane is who really popularized the term, the trap. So, and it's really about music, about people who are either selling drugs or trying to survive in that type of environment. So I took that concept and I flipped it, and for me it was, okay, one, we're all trapped because sin is the biggest trap of all. It's the one that, like, when you think about people selling dope, it's like, okay, I know I'm doing something that could ruin my life, but at the same time I think I'll find hope and peace in this, in the sense that I'll make money. Well, we all do that. Some of our traps is, like I said, workaholic. Some of our traps is alcohol. Some of our traps is sexual. Insert your trap there, and there it is. And you rarely find the true fulfillment that you're looking for. So that's the mental concept. If you're talking about the sonic concept, it's really, I call it trap caviar. So it's like taking the trap genre, and then on 5 songs, we had I had a 5-piece string. What's that? A quintet? A 5-piece string quintet?
Yeah,
I think that's what you would call
quintet? Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, something along those lines. I know it was 5 pieces. So, and then also I had some more of the creative and things like that. But yeah, man, it's my spin on trap music. It's like if I'm gonna do trap music, this is what I want it to sound like.
I like it because the sound's fresh, and it's where people are at, and it's where hip hop fans, it's what they want to hear, and I like it too because it doesn't, and I say this in the right way, it doesn't sound Christian, and there is such a, there can be such a I guess pull to be tamer. To reach a more mass appeal. Have you ever felt that pull or pressure to be a little more tame?
Nah. I've always been a renegade. If you ask my mom, she'll tell you. So I remember in church one day I started rapping, and my mom said we was at this convention. So it's like, it was in Louisville, Kentucky. There's a bunch of people from all over the Southeast. And this guy walks into the main service. There was like youth in a different part of the building, and the older people were in the main session. And this man walks in and says, "We need to pray for our children. They're in there doing the devil music and all of that stuff and all that." And my mom says, "I wonder whose kid is doing that." And then it turns out it was me. So,
yes.
So she's like, "What are you doing?" And then and I was just like, "Yo, you got me out here. I love rap. I don't even want to be here. So I'm just doing my thing." You know what I'm saying? My mom cracks this joke about her dragging me to church. But anyhow, I've never really cared as much if I did what I loved or did what I believed is right. and it rubbed people the wrong way.
Right.
Everyone experiences a degree of frustration with that, but at the end of the day, I always lean on the side of, well, I'm gonna do it anyway. So I don't really feel the pressure to try to make people feel comfortable. I feel the pressure to do what's in my heart. You know what I mean?
Well, man, I feel like we've already gone pretty deep in this podcast already, but we're going to take things to another level because, man, I usually ask this question to artists. I go, I'm usually curious if there's ever a lyric that you wanted to write or you wrote and then changed because, you were worried about it being misinterpreted or being too strong or maybe taking off the wrong people, but it doesn't feel like you're afraid to write anything.
Nah, I mean, yeah, I'm actually going through my head trying to think of a lyric that I would be like, I rewrote.
But even that, like,
I can't think of one.
I was going through just some refreshing because I've listened to your last couple of projects. I think there's 3 of them, the last 3, and I've put them on in the car. But as I started reading the lyrics, I'm like, dang, this guy's not afraid to say what he thinks. I like this. This is good.
Yeah, I think that's why. I think that's probably what made the Bad Christian podcast reach out to me because they're like, "Yo, you're like the black version of us." So
yeah.
It was crazy. But yeah, like, I mean, nah, I don't like. I'll try to. I think if I rewrote anything, it's not because of the idea; it's because of the clarity. So there'll be times when I'll have a lyric and I'm like, "That's not clear." Someone could misinterpret what I'm saying, but I rarely will rewrite. So I can't think of a time that I thought something needed to be said and I wasn't gonna say it. But I will think about how to say it so that it's not offensive and that it's clear. Like, I'll let the truth do the offending. I don't want to do the offending. You know what I mean?
Well, man, there's the song that stuck out the most to me, and I pulled up the lyrics as I was listening to it last night. I was sitting down my room, and my wife came in. I was listening to your song, and she starts trying to hip hop dance, and it wasn't good. But
yeah, we love that.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, if I had filmed it for Instagram, I'd be a dead man today. You'd have to find my body somewhere. But, dude, the song "It Is What It Is."
Yeah,
man, I read just the chorus and I go, okay, that's deep. I read the first verse and I wasn't sure I was ready for any more. I was like, man, you just hit me on a few levels. So tell me about writing that song, man.
Yeah, that actually was created from an actual conversation. Someone that's really close to me was selling drugs at the time, and we were talking about it, and in his mind, he literally had no other option. Quite honestly, his logic wasn't really flawed. The community he was in, there was a lack of education, over policing. So, the over policing affected his dad. So, in his mind, my dad's a felon, couldn't really create opportunities for us. And then felons can't, a lot of people won't hire you if you're a felon. You can't vote, miss a lot of rights. The neighborhood he's from is poor. So the idea of going to, and then the educational system is bad. So, and there's people that don't really care. So even if there were scholarships, he wouldn't know about them because nobody told him. So, and then you also thinking that's where the idea of, hey, you tell me go get a job or go to college. What do I do about feeding myself right now? College is 4 years down the road. Everyone struggles in college. So it's like I can either sell drugs right now and take care of my family and take care of my people, or I can go to school for 4 years and everyone starves to death, but I got a degree. Like, it just didn't make any logic. It didn't make any logical sense. And it showed me how our country deals with our poor and disadvantaged. We don't really take care of them, but we hold them to a standard that's beyond their means. And, he said at the end of our convo, he's like, hey, man, I know it sucks, man, but it is what it is. That's what life is about. Like, that's how it goes for me. And from that, it just it broke me because I didn't have an answer. Like, I'm like, I'm like, I didn't really have anything to give him. Like I couldn't. There was no. I would be a fool to give him some. Hey man, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like Martin Luther King said, it's one of the most cruel things to do to tell a man with no boots to pick himself up by his bootstraps.
Wow.
A bootless man, tell a bootless man to pick himself by his bootstraps. And I said, I mean, that's literally what we're told, right? For everyone that commits crimes and is poor, like they tell us in America, being poor is a choice, and it's not. It's not a choice at all. It's no one would choose to be poor.
Yeah.
You know, they're born into it, and it's handed down from their parents, and they're gonna hand it down to their children unless something miraculous happens. And we have to realize that.
Well, man, like I live up in Canada. That's been home for me. And growing up in the suburbs of Toronto, and we have our issues in Toronto. We have our issues with crime and gangs and violence and drugs and poverty. You know, you name it. But we don't. I got to be honest. I feel a little bit unaware being a white Canadian male living in the suburbs, you know, with the Walmart and living in the place where you don't even lock your door at night because it's just a neighborhood, safe neighborhood. And, you know, everything kind of, you know, you feel like you're going to see Mr. Rogers walking down the street, giving you a wave. Like, you know,
Right.
that's my upbringing and that's my background. So that becomes my lens. And I feel like a lot of people may have that lens, but it doesn't feel like that's an accurate lens of what a lot of people live with and deal with on a daily basis, just as you described. So how can you describe being a black male in today's climate in America?
I can describe it as frustration. You gotta think, our history has been wiped away. Like, I don't know where I came from prior to 1619. So our language, our culture, everything was stolen from us. And then post the Emancipation Proclamation and post-Civil War, we were thrown in jail with Jim Crow laws. And then, you know, our fathers were imprisoned over things like gathering together in public or your house being dirty. Like, they could take you to jail for things like that. Right. I mean, like, actually take you to jail because you didn't show up to work on time. You know, your boss could send you to jail. These are Jim Crow laws. So when you think about that, and then you also think about the dehumanization of the black man that is continuing now in the world, which is just, it's a lesser version of Jim Crow laws, but still the ideology is the same for a lot of people, which is, hey, these black guys are just lazy. That's a slave mentality. That's a slave master's mentality. Yeah. Which the slave master brings slaves over, makes them work for free, and then calls them lazy because they don't want to work for free. You know what I mean? Like,
you
know what I mean? So it's like that ideology has been passed down. Then also, you know, when you think about wealth in America, we were redlining prevented us from getting loans to start businesses, while the government actually gave farmers in the South loans to start businesses, taught them how to work the land, sent them to college for working the land, right? And black people had no access to those things. And then there was, you know, I hear people say things like, well, black people tear their communities up and all those different things, but every community after slavery that actually did well was tore down. Like, prime example is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, which they had their own banking system, had great they had great neighborhoods. They were doing well. The government actually came in and tore that neighborhood down with fire. Wow. Along with the people there. Or you think in New York, in Central Park, they needed more land. There were black landowners in a middle class neighborhood in Manhattan, and they literally they kicked those people out of their homes that they owned and built a park on top of it. It's called Central Park. So when you think about all those things, and then you hear what people say today, and you hear the rhetoric about us, and our history, the good parts of our history have been wiped away, and the bad parts of our history are on television at all times, or Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
Right.
All I say is it's frustrating. You know what I mean? It's frustrating, but at the same time, there's a beauty in that, is because, you know, our skin is thick.
Yeah.
If there's anything, is that our skin is thick, and some of the things that you've seen, rap music, our art, our creativity, like when you think of jazz, was created literally because black people couldn't go to school and college to learn how to create orchestra music. So that's how jazz was created.
Wow.
Like, so necessities and things like that, like those types of situations gave us a different level of creativity and temperament that make us have to, you know, it made us have to improvise and learn how to be creative.
And, you know, like, again, it's one of those things that I find, because Canada has its problems, absolutely, but I would say the racial tension here is not at all what it is south of us. But I read an interview that you did, because you've really become an entrepreneur, a man of business, someone who has started record labels and been a producer and an artist and has done well and provided. And I've been to your house, and you got a beautiful house, and it's great. And you've been blessed, and yet you're still so generous and humble. But you had this quote that people in your neighborhood are still trying to figure out what you do. And I thought that was kind of funny. So tell me, like, I mean, it's funny in a way, but it also speaks to the conversation we're having. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So that was really more metaphorically.
Yeah.
In a sense that, you know, my neighborhood, you know, now my neighbors know me. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's different, but early on, it's this young black man moving into this great house, and at the time I was doing shows, so I'm renting cars every week. Every other week or whatever. So, you know, I'm pulling up with whatever it is. And people are like looking around, like, one of my neighbors, like, they're like, so what do you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was really, I wanted to capture the idea that, you know, oftentimes when you see someone in my position,
mm-hmm.
you know, people still have that worry that I'm a criminal.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, going to stores and things, like, you get the extra help. You know, people are like, can I help you? Can I help you? Can I help you? I'm like, no, I'm just looking. And it's like, you asked me 10 times, like, I'm literally just looking. And then as you're walking out the store, they're kind of, you know, side-eyeing you, making sure you didn't steal something. And it's just like, it's that idea that, you know, y'all don't even know, like, I'm a Christian.
Yeah. And
I love you. And and your kids may listen to my music and are encouraged, but all you see is a black man with a bald head, and that's frightening to you.
And they wouldn't even know that you'd probably be the first guy to stand up to somebody who's trying to commit a crime, and protect the story. You know, like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And with that, like, it's a great eye-opening conversation for me to have. And what this is my question as we kind of wrap up this area of our conversation. We'll talk just a little bit about your music too, and but you know, what would you want me to know as a white male Christian believer, church-going, Bible-believing guy? What would you want me to know about this issue of racial tension and profiling and whatnot? What would you say to me? And what's the thing you would love me to understand about some of the issues you face and your culture faces?
I would say anyone that is racist doesn't have a great understanding of the gospel.
Absolutely true.
I mean, that's really just what I would say. You know, I think James says true religion is taking care of the widows and the orphans, and our people have been orphaned more by the government than any people in the history of the world. Now, you know, even, you know, people like to bring up abortion and weaponize that to talk about black people, but I mean, abortion was literally a plot by people to either sterilize black mothers or kill black children. So it's like, when even in that sense, white people's hands are not clean in that effect either, because that was actually a systematic plot to sterilize black women and also kill black children. So it's like literally like this world was built on white, like I call America was a racial caste system. And when you see the effects of that, you're not here to judge. You should be broken by that. And then the next step would be, okay, well, what do I do about it? What you do about it is risk being ostracized for the gospel. And the gospel is to the orphans and the widows. So yes, everyone does crimes. Black people, white people, any people, they do crimes. Like that's just what it is. And I'm not telling you to advocate for people being criminals. What I'm telling you to advocate is when black people tell you, hey, these laws are oppressing us, listen to them.
Yeah.
Like, don't just brush it off as, oh, that's just black people trying to take advantage of a system. Because I don't want anything more than what I should have, you know. But you have to think who had, like, I remember at a time people were talking about equality. I don't want equality. I want equity. See, what equity is this. Equity is if we're trying to put everybody on the same level, but you can't have equity is putting everyone at the same point on the starting line. Well, black people have been at least 400 years from being at the same level as far as at the starting line with white people. So then that means that we have to do something to get black people to the same level that white people, the opportunities that white people have had. So, you know, I don't know what that looks like, but back in the 90s or the early 2000s or the 2010s, when we would say those things, people wouldn't believe us. They would say, well, just don't do a crime. And it's like, well, it's not about doing the crime. It's about justice, actual justice. So it's things of that. I mean, I could give you all kinds of examples, but this podcast would triple in length. You know?
Well, man, and I appreciate that, because I love that you are being an advocate for what you see, and you speak the truth, but you speak it with love, and that is something that I appreciate about you. And I mean, your latest record, Your Soul Must Fly High Above the Trap, 3 different pieces address some of these issues, and man, some of your best work I've ever heard. And a lot of people might not know that you've won Dove Awards, you've been nominated for Dove Awards, Stellar Awards, you've won a Grammy as a producer. But what's the accomplishment that means the most to you that you look back in your career and say, man, that was something special?
Man, my greatest accomplishment, it would probably be the Empire album, because that was my first album post being signed to Reach Records. So I finished up my deal with Reach, and then I dropped Empire, and it sold more than any record I put out. Wow. So I think that would be it, is that record being successful, because it proved to me that I could do this with my team, and that you know, that the Lord was with me and in my endeavors to build my own business. So I think that's probably my biggest accomplishment to this day.
And yeah, you're part of the Reach Records lineup, and now you've been independent, but you've also you got your hand in producing and sort of showcasing other new artists. Yeah. Who is the most skilled artist right now that you've had the chance to be working with lately that people just got to know about?
Oh my goodness, that's hard. I'd say artist on our label by the name of Cannon. I mean, he literally produces, writes all his music, produces everything, produces for others. I mean, does most of his video treatments. I mean, he literally does every aspect of the music. So I'd probably give it to him, man. He's just, sometimes I just look at him, I'm just like, I can't believe you know how to do all of this. You know what I mean? So yeah, it'd probably be Cannon.
And you guys just got off tour recently, didn't you?
Yeah.
And tell me about that tour. Where'd you guys go? Is there any more tours coming up that we can get excited for?
Absolutely, yeah. That tour was crazy. In the sense of, man, this was our first tour together, and it was all booked internally. So for me, we're trying to figure this thing out, and having him with me, man, it was fun. It was some of the most fun I ever had. But yeah, it was fun. It was a grind though. But we're starting it up again in April. So I think the first show actually is in March. So yeah, we got a couple joints in March, and then April we're going full force. So that's part 2 of the It's Not a Game tour.
What part of the country or the continent or the world are you gonna be hitting on that tour?
Everywhere, bro. We got like 20 shows right now, something around that. So I don't know where they're all at, but they're everywhere. But we're gonna start putting out the information pretty soon.
Good.
Yeah,
Man, this has been a great conversation, and we've talked about a lot of stuff on this, and we've covered a lot. But musically, you're a guy I trust for good music. So I think I feel okay to trust you with our listeners right now to tell us what's on Derek Miner's playlist. What are you listening to right now? I mean, Cannon. You're into Cannon stuff. Is there some songs by Cannon in particular we got to check out?
Yeah, I mean, his last album just came out called Home. It's an amazing project. Like, it's crazy. I've really been into that. As of right now, it's another artist named Montel Fish. He has a project called It's Beautiful. And I love that record because it's pretty much like, it's I don't know, you just have to listen to it. I call it like soul worship.
Okay.
Or neo gospel. Like, maybe, if that's the thing.
We're gonna make it a thing.
Yeah, something new. And last but not least, this is an old record, but I don't think you guys have heard it yet. It's by a guy named Timothy Bloom.
Okay.
He has a project called The Beginning, and it's brilliant. So he takes literally like 50s bebop and updates it, and it's crazy.
Awesome.
Like, dude is wild, man. It's like, it's crazy. Like, he does a cover of I think it's called Nobody Does It, or Nobody Does It Like You. It's crazy, man. Dude he's insane. Yeah. Timothy's a monster. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out, man. And dude, we're looking forward to seeing where things go next. When is the next Derek Miner project coming out?
I don't know, man. We chilling, so
you're gonna take it easy. All right.
Yeah, I have one done, and it's in the can. So we're figuring out how we're gonna roll it out, but we're just kind of taking our time with it because I want the rollout to be special. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as we roll out of this episode, I always want to leave. Oh, I know, that was not bad, huh? But man, I love to leave our listeners with something special to listen to, and I want you to leave us with your favorite Derek Miner track. So give us something and set us up with something to listen to on our way out of this.
Yikes. My favorite track?
Or it can just be one that, like, when you play it live, you're just like, man, I'm locked in now.
Yeah.
Well, something that feels good to you when you play it or sing it or whatever.
I would say there's 2 tracks on the trap that are my favorite, and one of them is called Of Course, featuring my artist Byron Jawan, and the other one would be Don't Cry, featuring my dude Aaron Cole. I think any one of those 2 will get you there.
All right.
Or the trap intro will get you there too.
So why don't we do this? I'm going to close out this conversation with Don't Cry, and then I'm going to play, of course, at the end of the episode, and we'll find the trap intro somewhere else in this episode, all right?
Let's get it.
All right, Derek Miner, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Leaving us here, this is Derek Miner with Aaron Cole, Don't Cry, right here on the Overflow Beyond the Music podcast.
I know you saw me at the worst time. You was praying all night, and I know that even when I wasn't right, you was standing by my side. Cause you didn't see what everybody else saw. I bet they wish they all had your vision out. You just saw that little boy that got caught. I'm finally tuned in.
Man, I told you, Derek Miner does not disappoint. He has more than a few things to say about issues that are not only facing the church, but facing us as society. And it's not just an America thing. I live in Canada, and we see some of the same issues here, but it's a worldwide thing. And I think that what Derek is doing is he's speaking from the heart. He's speaking things that he's experienced. And for me, again, as I said in the interview, as being a white male from Canada, there are issues that I can't really speak to fully because I have not experienced that in my life, but Derek has. And the people that his friends and family have experienced those things, and I just really appreciate Derek being willing to step out and speak his mind and do so from a biblical perspective, which I think is huge. And so special thanks to Derek Minor for coming on the podcast. Cannot wait for him to be putting out new music. But I'll tell you, we are working on a very, very special next episode. I can't give away all the details right now, but we're going to be having more than just one guest on the next episode. And we're going to be talking about an issue that may be taboo for the church a little bit historically, and maybe taboo for a lot of some of these artists to come out and be honest about, but it's something that's hit home for me. I know it's something that a lot of people will resonate with, and that's all the teaser I'm going to give you right now. But we are going to take some risks and charter some new waters on this next episode that's going to be coming up. Should have it your way in just about 2 weeks. But as we close out this podcast, here's some more music from Derek Minor. Check it out. I'm Josh McCabe. This is the Overflow Beyond the Music podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Go follow us online at The Overflow BTM on Instagram. That's The Overflow BTM on Instagram. Here's a little Derek Minor for you. We'll see you next time.
Of course, I ain't gotta worry about a thing anymore. I just, yeah, of course, with a kind of thorns, feeling like a king. Yeah, of course, made it out the bottom. Of course, I ain't gotta worry about a thing anymore. I just, yeah, of course, with a kind of thorns, feeling like a king. Yeah, of course.
Young little